All right, guys. So we're going to start talking a bit about working with planes today, and I don't mean like airplanes. What I really mean by a plane is like a sheet of paper, right? So if we think about a sheet of paper, and I kind of hold it, kind of going out at you, this plane goes off into a distance, right? It goes off into the distance, and if I kind of keep it flat like this, it looks like a rectangle. Or, if we also kind of look at it, going in a direction like this, it could be like the side of a box or something like that, right? So when we're thinking about a plane, we're actually thinking about like a sheet of paper in space, right? Is it flat against it like this? And so that we're looking at a face plane like this one here, or is it an angled plane that's going back into space like this, right? That angled plane idea, like the top of a box or something like that. So working with planes is just like that idea, when we're thinking about it in art, but when we're thinking about it in a fine art in a 2D sense, what we're really kind of thinking about is working with illusion of planes, right? So this is, of course, a square. And when you were growing up, I'm sure that you did this next one here more than one time, which is kind of working with a mirrored plane. So I have a square here, and then I'm putting another square in behind it, right? So both of these squares are flat planes that have a face, right? A face plane. And then we've kind of created two of them here, one in front or behind the other, and they're transparent, right? And then if we kind of go to the corner here and we start putting in another plane, right? Now this becomes a third plane at the very top of here. And then these planes are converging at a series of vertex like this, right? And then we're thinking about where their edges are, and so we're going to create another plane over here. There's our fourth plane here, right? And then this line will actually create the fifth and sixth plane of a cube. So if you think about a rolling dice, right? If you have a single die, it has 6 sides. Now we have 1, 2, 3 for this big one up front, 4 for the big one in the back, 5, 6 sides, and we've created a series of planes. It's 6 planes altogether. We could think about this even more if you start to think about, instead of these planes being transparent, like when you make one of these, over here we could do the same thing, but we could create these planes opaque, right? And so here we can't see the other planes through it all. In fact, to push it even farther, we could even add some shading to a couple of the planes so that we have an idea of them in space a bit more, right? And now we have 3 planes that you can see on a 6-plane object, right? It's kind of pretty much like math class if you get into geometry, and we're thinking about that these other 3 planes actually exist in there, but we can't actually see them. They're kind of behind things, right? Or if we think about them, they're kind of back in there somehow. So now we could think about different types of forms like this, that this would work as well. So let's take this as a cube form. Let's take a pyramid. So there's 2 different types of planes that make up a pyramid. There's a triangle plane, right? And then there is a square plane. But in this case, the square plane kind of moves back in space. So if we start to think about what a square plane looks like at an angle, we could kind of draw it like this, right? And then as we're kind of going through, we got to think about where all of them are going to meet up at. And then we're going to create a triangle here, right? And then we can create another triangle by putting in this line. And then we'll create two more triangles by placing in this line, the one that's in there and the one that's over there, right? And so now we've created a pyramid form, but it's transparent, much like the pyramid, much like the cube that's right above it, right? So, and then here we have the two different types of planes, right? And this one just only had one type of plane. So then I'm sure you've drawn these before because this is probably harder to draw than the finalized form. But if we think about it as opaque, we have this plane here and the one that's here. And you don't really see the plane that's underneath or the ones that are behind anymore. And so here is our pyramid made out of planes, right? And this would work with any type of shape at all, or I should say form at all. Or really, you could combine multiple shapes together to create one of these, no problem. So if we take a basic trapezoid concept like this, and then we can do the same thing over here. We can make the trapezoid, and then much like when we were doing the cube, we can mirror the trapezoid behind it over here. And then once we have this mirrored trapezoid going on, we can connect our planes, our two planes together with 1, 2, 3, 4 more planes, right? And then we have a six-sided, a trapezoidal form. And if we were to redraw this, then again, as something that's more opaque, I might have to make this a little bit smaller to fit it on the paper here. You would have this section here in the front, and then you would see this section here, and the one that goes down, and then these ones would be the sections that had shading, right? And then this, of course, shows you the other planes, and they would be in there if we, really thought about it for a second, but that's the part that's opaque, right? We can't see through that section at all. So it ends up looking like that instead. So these are what planes are, right? And you could think about, ones that go like off into space a bit more, like that looks like it's going backwards a bit more. Or you might think about, ones that are just flat faced to us. And those help a bit when you're kind of trying to decide how depth works. Also, sometimes you'll see people create a plane for the ground by kind of working in a one-point perspective technique like this, and it gives you an idea that objects could kind of stand in here, right? So then we could think about, how you might be able to stand here on this plane, right? So those types of ideas really do work very, very well in space here, but also, with these concepts of plane, right? And of course, this plane is coming out. It would be like the ground. And you've seen it probably maybe even made with some lines like this as it goes back into space, right? And then we call this a floor plane. So we just talked about dealing with planes, but what if your object isn't made out of planes? Like, let's say you have, a ball of some sort. So a ball is not made out of planes at all, right? And we could say a circle is a plane because it's flat, and you could have a circular plane, but that's not what I'm talking about. How do we get a circle to look more spherical, or to think about the thickness of the circle, right? How thick is the circle? And that's when we need to start to work with something called contour rings, right? So if we kind of put our circle in here, and we want to think about how to get it from being a circle into being something that is a bit more three-dimensional, we could start thinking about something called contour rings. And if you can think of the globe or a beach ball, you can start to think about these lines that go around the globe. In the globe, they're called meridian lines, right? And on a beach ball, they're probably also called meridian lines, but they just signify different panels of plastic that have been used. This could also be thought of like a basketball. The basketball has lines that go around the basketball. In fact, it also has a line that goes around it in this direction, right? So if we start to think about these lines that are going around, these actually go all the way around. So not only do they go that way around, but they actually go through this object. So if we're thinking about how we were thinking about the transparent cube before, you could think about the transparent globe very similarly to that by kind of creating these elliptical shapes that go through and out the other side of it. And that's what you need to start to think about when you're thinking about how to give something some depth that's not necessarily a object made of planes, right? So there's no planes here. Instead, we're thinking about going around the object, what it looks like to go around the object. So another one that would work like that is we know we have a shape called a cone, right? And a cone shape like this, or cone form, I should say, if we're thinking about it in an opaque fashion, you would see it like this, where it has a slightly rounded bottom and then this kind of triangular top to it. But if we actually start to think about the cone itself, or we're thinking about the form of the cone, and we want to think about giving it a more three-dimensional flair, one of the things that we really need to think about are these circles that go around on the inside, right? These, in this case, we're looking at them at an angle we would refer to as an oval, or more rightly, more correctly, you would call these ellipses, right? And these ellipses are kind of going in one side and all the way around. So we're seeing through this object, right? We're looking through it as if this is made out of ice or glass or something like that, that we can see through one side to the other. And working with ellipses like this, gives you an idea. Just like the ellipses that are here to make up the ball, you have the ellipses with inside of this shape here. Now, we could just kind of play around with ellipses and make some kind of random shape as well. So if you have like an organic shape that you're trying to create and you're not really sure about how to make it, if you start thinking about what a series of ellipses might look like, that about its around its thickness, could we start to create some kind of a random shape? Yeah, absolutely we could. And it could go from fat to skinny or skinny to fat, and then we could just start kind of connecting together some of these ellipses and thinking about how this shape works as a form, right? So, looking through it, the idea as creating form or depth to it, right? So these would be working with different types of ellipses, or thinking about types of ellipses, rather than thinking about planes in forms that that are more rounded or more natural or more organic, or blobby, right? You can think about organic shapes are kind of blobby, and organic forms are too. And that would be, how to start to deal with people and things like that as well. All right, so then I guess the next real question is, why do I need that? What do I need those things for? Why would I need to, have planes or understand what planes are? Or why would I need contour lines? And I think that's, simply enough put, that it really works in everyday drawing. So, if I just start to kind of take this and say to myself, oh, these are some lips, and I just start making some lip marks on here, and I go like, all right, this is looking like some lips to me. It makes kind of it's not a horrible drawing or a quick notation, but if I really kind of take my time and I start to think about the ellipses that might be made by these contour lines, or the lines that are, coming across, I can actually give, this a feeling these lips a lot more feeling of depth as I go through and start to actually draw them. And in doing that, I can create a significantly better drawing, right? So as I go through, I can think about, exactly kind of what direction each one of these contours would really need to go into in order to make something that really feels like it's a lip. And it's just working with, some lines and the placement of line and thinking about, its form. So really, really thinking about the fact that this is, a series of ellipses that gives, form to it, that shows the contour. All right, so then beyond this, we can look at some planes, right? So when we start really thinking about why you would need to know how to draw with planes, you can just start to think about, what types of objects are made out of planes, and those types of objects, they're mostly man-made objects, right? Man-made objects tend to really have a lot of planes to them. So if I wanted to start to kind of, draw, let's say, a pickup truck, and we'll say, a late Model 1, something like early 80s, late 70s, I can start to think about like how those planes that make up that pickup truck actually fit together in order to start to really make my image. So as I'm, working across here a bit, I can start to see in my mind's eye, what these planes might look like if we were, actually standing in front of a vehicle. So you can get an idea right away. I was able to really work through a lot of this idea without any real image, just by kind of using planes that I'm thinking about in my head. So that's how these planes really kind of help work out in an object, because a lot of man-made objects like cars or trucks are actually made out of planes. Also, buildings and chairs and tables and houses, and so there's a lot of material that can be drawn by using a series of planes, right? So we have like this plane going into the background here. We have this plane that's on the top here. You have the plane that makes up the front here. You got the plane that's the inside of the roof, right? So all those different kind of things add up to kind of finalized drawing, right? So when you're thinking about, how or why planes are important, that's really why they're important, and it's important to kind of get your mind, wrapped around working with planes a bit. Now, the idea of contour rings is not just important when we're looking at how to add some depth to something, but we can also really start to think about contour rings being very, very, very useful tools when it comes to all types of very, very important ideas in art. And one of those ideas about contour rings is dealing with positions of the head and face. So dealing with positions of the head and face, and we'll try to use some of these circles I'm making here to illustrate just exactly that, right? So first of all, let's say, if we have, this circle here, we can kind of add in a bottom bit to make it a bit egg-shaped. And then once we have kind of this egg shape going on, we can start to think about, how we want this face to be facing. What direction is this face looking in? And so when we start thinking about contour rings, if I have one that's just going directly from the front to the back, it would appear like a line, right? And then, of course, if I had one that was going directly from side to side, it would also appear kind of like a line. But then if I started to, play with that same exact face, and let's make this part a little bit shorter than that, and if I had this contour line coming around like this from behind and around, I'm not going to draw through the object this time like we were doing before when we were making them transparent. And then I had one that was coming down from around the back. You can get the idea that this person is kind of looking, out or forward at you, where this person is kind of looking down towards the ground over here, right? So when we're thinking about how to kind of deal with faces or direction, that really, 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 and it could be done in a more cartoony style than this. We could think about, how to deal with, slightly more American cartoony style of object, but it's the same concept in here, where as in there's a cross contour that's kind of headed this way, or cross contour, a contour ring that's kind of headed this way, and one that's headed in this direction. And then upon kind of, hitting that area is where these things would kind of line up, right? So as we're looking at, a face on there, or thinking about how a face might work on there, those faces would kind of come together in an idea like this, and those contour rings would give us a position for the face to be looking, right? So, that's what I mean by, different ways of starting to think about working with these types of mark making ideas that will really, really help to improve, how you're dealing with your own work, or how you're kind of seeing things and lining things up, right? So last but not least, when we're thinking about planes, and we're thinking about ellipses, and we're thinking about contours, is really kind of drawing with ellipses. And drawing with ellipses is something that you can do on a pretty regular basis. And it's a really great way of handling things like, let's say, a bottle. So if we were doing a Coke bottle, and I actually just happen to have one sitting over here, we'll try to draw that Coke bottle a little bit. One of the things that you are going to have problems with is, trying to line up your or trying to figure out all your thicknesses as you're going down when you're drawing something like a Coke bottle or a vase or something like that too. So as I start to kind of draw my Coke bottle, if I think about the very top and I make an ellipse for the top, and then I skip down from there to where I kind of feel like the next bit of thickness might be at, I can start to really think about working with these ellipses or trying to figure out how the bottle will work using ellipses. So in here I can put another ellipse because I think that's the next thickest part of the bottle from the top of the drawing. And then if you know about a Coke bottle, it gets skinnier again. So we have now a series of ellipses starting all the way here at the top, and then every time it really changes to the next big amount of width, I put in another ellipse, then here it's skinny again, right? And then here it gets fat again. And this can then serve as kind of a guide when I'm drawing this. Now, the other thing that you want to keep in mind is that all of these should really be lined up, right? So that there should be kind of, if you're keeping a line going down the middle could really help you so that this is the same size as that and this side, right? So you want to make sure these are lined up, that they're not, all falling some different direction with each other. We could even put in some more of these. This is one of these bottles where you had to take the top off with a bottle opener. So there's a lot of change in width kind of in here too. So I have a change in width like this at the top, and then it kind of goes back again like this, right? So we have this to this, this to this, this to this at the top. And then as I come around here, this kind of goes like this, right? And then as I'm moving down here, oh, you know what? We should put in one more because there's kind of this section right below the label, even though it's just the same thickness across, that's demarcated, right? And then going down into this section here, down to this section, and then back out to form that base. Right? And then we have the shape of a Coke bottle, and all we did is kind of think about how fat it was and how far apart each different change in thickness was as we're kind of going through. So this is called working with ellipses. This also kind of works working with ellipses when you're drawing things like fruit. So if I wanted to, I could think about making a pear, and I could actually think about the sections of the pear that are elliptical, and then I can draw in kind of the rest of the pear pretty easily, right? And then I get that pear-like shape, pretty quickly out of something like this. And it's just a way of kind of starting to build different things. Now, this is two really great examples of how to work with ellipses, but a third one that works really, really well too is working with drawing flowers. So traditionally, you probably think about flowers and then you're kind of just making like a circle within a circle, and then you're thinking about the petals of this going out. And then this is kind of a simplistic idea of a flower, but flowers do kind of look like this, right? So there's a lot of times that we're thinking about kind of a simple flower, right? Now, if I start changing the direction of the ellipse here, and I instead decide that I want the flower to kind of be a bit more to the side, I can draw this in and then draw in an ellipse in the middle, and then I can start thinking about how each one of these petals looks as it comes out into something that's a bit more dimensional, right? So that's really the idea of how to draw with ellipses, or how to make forms with ellipse instead of earlier on where we were covering working with planes or even working with simple shapes, right? Which was one of the lessons before this one. So I think to help summarize in the end, what we should really think about is you can make things look 3D by indicating that the subject has multiple planes, like we were looking at earlier in the film. Also, that the contour line for regular objects kind of goes around it. So you can think about the ellipse that we drew. Those contour lines really help to give it some 3D effect, right? And that would work on anything like circles or blobs or things like that as well. You should always try to get more sketches done with a 3D aspect in it so that you have something that's more accurate, right? And then, to draw 3D objects, you really want to make sure that you're keeping, your verticals in there too, and those ideas of duplication, right? So earlier on we were talking about mirroring or duplication by kind of drawing an object and then drawing the same thing again, right? And connecting. So, and then of course, you can work with a series of contour rings like this to help simplify out a more complex object, right? So this works for a bottle like this, or the pear that's here, or these flowers, right? And kind of dealing with contour rings that also helped in the face as well. So think about those things. I think that's a good summary of everything that's in this video. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.